Good morning, everybody. Appreciate you being here this morning. See if we can do something to that. Oh, well, y'all saw the first slide, right? We'll start there. Thanks for, let me start back a second. There we go. I've been doing this since probably 2013, I think was the first one. It's always nice to have people show up here. We have a practice in the county of putting together an annual report at the end of each year for our citizens' consumption. It's good to kind of highlight what we've done over the past year, and it shapes what we do going forward. As well, our sitting council chair also does a State of the County report annually. This is not intended to supersede that or anything. It's kind of a separate path, but we present a lot of the same information as well. So I've got a bunch of slides up here, primarily pictures, because I like to just speak from those pictures. They give me good ideas, and I also will try to get through these in a reasonable amount of time. Despite things going on lately at various presentations, I won't take offense if you decide you need to leave this morning. I understand we're at the beginning of a work day, and some folks may need to do that, but I will take offense if I see things ripped up in the back. We'll just see what happens there. Anyway, we'll get started. I wanted to start with a few things. It's always nice to highlight. We're, as a community, recognized in a number of different ways, and part of this is a little bragging. So a couple of slides to start with. Niche.com, if you've never looked at that website, it's interesting. They named us the #1 county to live in the United States. That's pretty nice to hear. Excuse me, I went back. I missed one, and this is going to drive me nuts, but we'll see. All right, I went through them too fast. Okay, county was recognized in the last year as #1 best county to live in. We also got #3 by another publication. It somewhat supports that idea. Healthiest community to live in, or second healthiest. And then best place to live in New Mexico, both #1 and #2 in Los Alamos County. It's nice to get those kudos. I think it represents a lot of the efforts of the whole community. These weren't based solely on county operations, but it's nice to see that type of recognition, and it also exhibits the expectations of the community as well. Each time I come and present this, it's like, what did we do last year that implemented things from the prior year? So we have various, a couple of focus areas when we're looking at our planning. One of them is quality of life, and I've segregated my comments in the 3 various areas. Under quality of life, one of the biggest issues that the county has been facing, attempting to address over the last year and prior, is our housing crisis. I believe it was going on 3 years ago. Now the laboratory announced that they'd be ramping up operations. Budgets would be increasing, and shortly after that, the PIT mission was announced as being an expansion here. We're trying to get it back into play. The lab has been hiring, and that's caused a lot of pressure on our housing market. I'm sure many of you have seen that, experienced it. It's not just purchasing housing, but also in our rental market especially. This is one example of the county's efforts in that regard. This is down in White Rock, the Mirador subdivision. Many of you have driven by it and seen things starting to sprout from the ground down there. It's nice to see. As of December, we have issued 10 certificates of occupancy. So there are 10 of those houses that people are ready to move into if they have not already, and more are going up every day. So it's a neat project. It was initiated many years ago. In fact, this was the 3rd effort that the county went through to try to get housing built on this property. Our most recent iteration included some county participation to address extra high costs associated with basalt that's down in that area, and we contributed to the project in order to facilitate the installation of the spine infrastructure from which all the houses and development will feed. So this land is interesting because this is something that the county has been working on. This was land that was transferred to the county from the laboratory. for economic development purposes. And so we're actually putting this into use along the lines of what it was intended. This development itself is intended to have 165 houses when complete, single-family residents, and also another 50 to 60 multifamily complex in kind of a mixed use with some potential for a couple of retail opportunities on the eastern side of that development. If you're not familiar with it, New Mexico State Road 4 is just to the south of the project, to your left on the screen here, down on the main corridor in White Rock. Housing has dominated a lot of our conversations. The county is also working with a developer. This is vacant right now. If you've been down DP Road in the last week or so, you probably saw a trailer move out to that location. There's an affordable housing project being put in by Bethel Development on this parcel. Again, it was a parcel that was transferred to the county, which we are anticipating approximately 160 rental units. Oh, excuse me, that's combined. About 70 to 80 at this site, and then a similar amount across the street for another affordable housing project that is focused on seniors. And so on DP Road, as you enter DP Road on both the right and the left side of the street, we anticipate 2 separate affordable housing developments. We've already signed agreements with Bethel Development to do so, and they intend to begin this. In fact, due to financing, this construction season is going to be very busy, because as you go through to get the tax credits for affordable housing financing, there are some deadlines, and this needs to be constructed and ready for occupancy by December of this year. So we should see some pretty active development on the north side of the street, to be followed by additional development on the south side of the street. The neat thing about putting affordable in this location, though, was proximity to grocery stores, to downtown, and also the newly constructed or extended Canyon Rim Trail, which runs right across there and provides additional multimodal access to that site. I've appreciated some of the other, it's not all about new development, but we've seen some infill housing going in on various lots, some of which have been vacant since the Cerro Grande fire. It's nice to see, but a neat new prospect has been the addition to the county's arsenal of tools, and that is for mixed-use development. The county council began with this new zoning designation, which allows for a combination of commercial, retail, and residential in certain zones where it's applicable. And the institution of that particular zoning model allowed for a unique development here near Oppenheimer, where this is a 3-story building. If you were on the back side of this building, there's an additional floor. But the contractor came in and added a floor to an existing office building and converted the 2nd floor and the newly constructed 3rd floor to residential housing. So now we have commercial on the 1st floor with 2 levels of residential afterwards, which will help with our densities, with modern desire for downtown and accessible, walkable type of living opportunities. This is right in our downtown area and provides some additional housing in that area we would not have seen if it wasn't for the mixed-use status. One other interesting project that the county is working on is with the school system, and that is consideration of some property adjacent to the middle school, or immediately east of the middle school is about 30 acres of currently vacant land. There is some minor development there with the solar project, and I believe KRSN has a tower out there as well. But this land is set there for many years, and the school has expressed a desire with our housing crunch to be able to have some opportunities for their employees to find places to live. Typically, we call that workforce housing. It's a little bit different than affordable housing. It does not fit the same federal designations, but the idea is that individuals who may work in a variety of jobs, a lot of our service sector jobs, everything from the retail to our public safety personnel to our teachers, educators, may not fall within the income range to afford a bidding war with others for a single-family residence in any one of our higher-end subdivisions, which is actually percolating down to almost all subdivisions now. When housing goes on the market, there's a lot of bidders for that. The desire with this project is to create a situation where it could be an affordable product, not necessarily meeting those definitions, but instead having a price point that would hit what is known as the middle part of the market. We went through a housing study, and the results of that housing study, which was just completed this fall, indicated that it's that middle segment of our population that has the most difficulty finding housing, and that's people making somewhere between $60,000 and $100,000 a year in this market. And so we're looking at prospects for this property to work with the school system. There are certain things we're still trying to work out. One is ensuring a source of revenue for the schools. If they were to give this land for that purpose, they have and operate on a lot of land lease type of things today as a source of income for the school system. So if we could set up something similar to what we did at Smith's, where there's an income producing product, but also that workforce focus. So this would be products that fit in the range of people who make in that $60,000 to $100,000 a year range, but also we want to try to institute a mechanism to maintain that affordability, because there have been past examples where the first persons to buy a property came in at an affordable position, but then as it was resold, there was no provision to require it to meet those same standards. And so we're looking to institute a similar type of process on this property once developed, looking at something known as a community land trust. That is one possibility, where the land is retained under public ownership. And so persons trying to buy houses aren't paying for the land, but instead for the house itself. But with that type of ownership, you can have some deed restrictions so that when it's resold, there would be a cap on appreciation so that that savings is passed along to subsequent generations. In fact, there have been a couple of public meetings about this. One, I believe, last week. Next week, the council and the school board will be getting together during the school board's meeting on Tuesday night to discuss how we proceed with this project. Another process that the county has been put in place to try to facilitate quality of life issues has been to address both our first-time home buyers as well as those that might be in properties that need a little rehabilitation. And the council has put aside for the last, I believe we've had 3 years of what is known as the Home Rehabilitation Project, and 2 of the Housing Support Program, where we support the down payment for people going into a house for the first time. Both of those are income qualified types of processes, so we take applications for people who may qualify for that, and then we go through a process similar to getting a loan with any other institution. And if they qualify, the county then works with them to either provide some money to assist in that down payment or for some improvements to the properties. And depending on the future, then if the individual lives in it for a certain period of time, I believe it's 15 years, that type of participation is granted to the family that are in the house. Now, if they move out prior to that time, there are some prorated clawbacks for that money as well. So trying to improve our housing stock, not just by building new, but also updating that exists, and provide a mechanism for people who have difficulty getting into some of the housing products to have a little assistance in that realm, fill that gap. From a economic vitality, financial sustainability perspective, a couple other projects, and several things have been going on. Y'all are all familiar with the, what should I call it? What was the Consortium Property, which was originally a county economic development project. The county supported this project with the donation of land and also $600,000 monetary contribution originally for the consortium to locate in that and to construct this building. The consortium has graduated to the point where they were prepared to move out to find additional space, and they're working with our local community development, the LACDC, to build new space over on Research Park. But also, one of the businesses that was incubated within this facility wanted to purchase that facility and expand their operations. That is Pebble Labs. I'm sure you've heard of that. Pebble approached us to participate in the deal to the extent of allowing the consortium out of their prior economic development project, but also by providing some additional land adjacent to this parcel for them to expand their campus. And so what we have agreed to at this point has been an overall project that included the contribution of land from the county, contribution of $4 million from the state, which was a big contribution from state economic development, and also a $60 million industrial revenue bond to facilitate the construction of their new campus. And so we anticipate a lot of new construction in the coming years. The county's participation has been to basically facilitate these processes through our authorities. And it's a success both for the consortium, as that is an economic development project that has now graduated to a new location, but also by having a new project in place that will bring and sustain many of the jobs that have been at the consortium location in the past. One project, and there's no project we do that does not have some controversy, this had a little bit itself, was the potential for a hotel and conference center located on, again, some transferred land. This was a historical transfer known as the 20th Street area, and the county had been trying to attract a variety of businesses to that location. We had developed the property, put in infrastructure, and then advertised or solicited input. We went through a couple of proposals. In the end, we could not come to a deal on those proposals, so we were approached by a hotelier that, in fact, we've been working with to try to find some property here for many years. The hotelier has the Marriott flagship franchise and proposed a town place suites product, which is, I believe, in the 80 to 90 room range that they had proposed to build. They came in, they were interested in purchasing a portion of the 20th Street property for their needs. We had previously, and for many years, talked about some other hotel needs as well as a potential conference center, which would allow us to capture some of the conferences that are emanating from the lab and other entities here in town. Never had a place. We lost a lot of those types of conferences down the hill, Pewaukee, Buffalo Thunder, and even to Santa Fe. Now, we're not going to be able to rival Santa Fe in the long run. They've got a lot of facilities, but we did want to have something that we could provide for local use. And so we negotiated with this hotelier for the construction of a conference center adjacent to the hotel. The hotelier stated they would be willing to do so. There is a cost, and if you've ever looked into conference centers, they come with a sustained operational cost over many years. Talked to the folks down in Las Cruces when they built their new conference center, and there was a big cost to that over time that they expressed some concerns about, is probably the best way to say it. So with that knowledge, we actually ended up in the deal was to donate the land for the construction of both the hotel and the conference center. But the operator also agreed to operate this conference center for the next 15 years. And so we hope to have a new opportunity for a variety of events here. And then also adjacent to some new hotel rooms, which has been sorely needed in our community for many years. We've also had several new businesses open, and this is just an example of a couple of them that have come into existence over the last year, or expansions of and relocations of existing buildings, businesses. We had the Cricket Window, which relocated into a new, bigger space. Rigoberto's, which was a popular place up here in Los Alamos, expanded down into the old Pizza Hut in White Rock. And then we had a new entity, Bosey Brothers, come in to Central Park Square to open a brew pub there. And so new additions, there's been other examples in the community. It's just nice to see that type of activity, supports our economy, and provides amenities for our citizens living here. As well, through a long-term process, the county's been looking at the property down in Longview and had a couple of conversations with some of our partner agencies about some redevelopment of that property. However, it's kind of a interesting ownership. Not all of the buildings down in Longview were singly owned, several different owners down there. And in the past, the housing partnership, I believe, had purchased, I believe it's this lot here, which was the former Catherine's restaurant, if you remember that one. Many of the buildings in the middle were owned by a single family, and there was some concerns with the construction of that building. On the exterior, a lot of the block was beginning to separate, and our personnel in our building department had some concerns about its engineering and safety. So, in fact, we did an inspection, ended up cordoning off for public safety some of those buildings and working with the owner ultimately through the court system to actually have this property demolished. And it's now, if you've driven through Longview, it's a different perspective. There's no buildings out there. I've got not the latest pictures up here, but there are a couple of the buildings that were owned by others that were in serviceable shape. But we now have a new parcel that's open there and have had initial conversations about the future of this property. So there's going to be an opportunity there. Obviously, the limitations for us locally, not only for housing, but for business expansion, is the availability of land. And so this is a prospect that I hope to see developed in the near future. Additionally, with all this activity, our council has had some concerns about what the future is going to look like. Do we want to have 10 high-rise apartment buildings in our downtown, obscuring views of the mountains or limiting our access to trails? Do we want to make sure that in the construction of these that we don't have a parking jam every day at noon or traffic concerns? And so the county has engaged. In fact, we went back to council. They approved funding for us to pursue a update to our development code. And so we are in the process. In fact, I believe today we'll be releasing the advertisement for someone to come in and actually propose to look at our Chapter 10, which is our development code, and provide some revisions to that, work with staff, with the idea that we'll first look at our downtown area, think about those issues I mentioned with respect to viewscape, mobility, and density type of issues, come up with a plan for downtown, because that's going to be a unique opportunity for densities primarily. But then once we go through that process, the RFP we anticipate will first be focused on the downtown area and then expand that interest to the entire county to try to have a new and updated version of our development code to promote some of the things that we're facing right now and also regulate those things to make sure we're not overrun by development that is not in accordance with the desires of the community. So there'll be opportunity for community participation to get those ideas out and hopefully incorporate that into our new development code in the near future. One of the other things we accomplished during the last year was the relocation of our visitor center for the Manhattan Project National Historical Park. That was important due to some lease issues with our previously existing location, but also we wanted to move this more proximal to, this visitor center that is provided by the county close to the Manhattan Project Visitor Center, which was existing in our, what is now the youth center. The former county building has had a lot of uses over time, but today we moved the Los Alamos Visitor Center, which is run under contract by LACDC, to the same building that the Manhattan Project Visitor Center is located. And we had our tourism committee do a survey of our community to determine what would be the best location for that. This location came out on top of the available space, primarily due to its proximity to the features of the Manhattan Project and the existing visitor center that was there. So we can now direct people to that location. They come, they're downtown, and hopefully can then go around and visit not only the amenities, but also the businesses in the downtown area. Another new project, and this will see more activity as we proceed, during the last year, in fact, it was, I believe, October, the county purchased the former, what was at the time the Christian Science, I'm sorry, but I don't get the denomination exactly right, but there was a church in what was formerly the WAC building, the Women's Auxiliary Corps, during the time of the Manhattan Project. And the neat thing about this building, it was one of the remaining original buildings from that era. If you walk in, as we were looking at it to consider purchasing it, right on the wall as you enter the building is a blueprint of the construction drawings for this building. And it's stamped WAC, Department of Defense, 1943. And it's pretty exciting to see that type of stuff. And then as you walk throughout the building, you'll note that it's pretty much in the same condition it was. Although the congregation has been in there for many years, they limited any remodeling of the facility primarily to the removal of a couple of walls. This was originally housing, I believe it was 18 dormitory rooms, and existing right now are 16, if I recall correctly. And upstairs is still in that same configuration, 2 rooms with the bathroom in the middle, another 2 rooms, same type of thing throughout. Single pane windows, nice brass features in there, beautiful fire hydrants, if you remember the old metal fire hydrants that you, and the county did purchase that building with the caveat that the congregation could stay in there for 6 months as they attempted to find a new location. And so by the end of this month, February of 2020, they are slated to move out of the facility, and then the county will begin some remodeling with an eye towards uses in the future that will complement the tourism aspects of our community, primarily the Manhattan Project National Historical Park, as this was part of that era. And if you're familiar with this location, it's not but just across the block that we have what is now the Little Theater, which was the former lunchroom, also associated with the project. And then this all is very close to our existing walking trail for tourists who come and go to the visitor center, Fuller Lodge, and this would all be a 3 to 4 block to make this walk to make the circle. And then one other thing, and again, controversy can be beneficial at times. We did go through a process, as the county is required as a local government, to advertise for services. As we advertised for our summer concert series, we did have a new entrant, a new proposal this year. It was actually awarded to a group that had not performed that duty in the past, and there was some concern about what changes that would bring. In the end, it brought a lot of new bands and a lot more people downtown for the summer concert series. We saw crowds that we had never seen before. In particular, on the Science Fest weekend, which is our summer event, Chevelle Shepard, who I believe it was The Voice she won. Forgive me if I got that wrong, but we had 8,000 people show up for a concert in Los Alamos County, and that caused us some concerns. We were worried about transportation, just all sorts of possibilities, but it turned out everybody had a good time. We got a lot of good reviews by that, and it was not the only concert during the summer, but we had kind of a renewed interest in the summer concert series, and since that time, we have been through another solicitation, and Sancre Productions, which was the operator last year, did win the solicitation this year. We actually advertised a multi-year contract so that whomever was going to be the recipient could do better planning for future years as they try to schedule these bands significant time into the future. And then the final area under governance, as many of you know, you probably participated in a variety of recreational project planning and input series that we had 2 years ago. We went through the process. Council came down and determined they'd fund 4 projects, but then that kind of coordinated with the transition at the laboratory. And there was some concerns about whether or not the county would continue to receive gross receipts taxes from the operations at the laboratory. And at the time, suspended those projects. Council decided to wait for that answer before we proceeded. And then that answer came in the form of SB 11 last year, where the state enacted a new law to assure that laboratory operations within the state of New Mexico would be taxable. With that information, in May of this past year, the council approved contracts to proceed with those 4 projects. And this is one of them, being an expansion at the Aquatic Center for a kiddie pool, or a pool that will have warmer water, 0 entry, and some amenities such as slides and other spray features to be a little more than what is existing as a competition pool in the Aquatic Center today. We also have upgrades to our ice rink, which we started to work on initially. We're hoping to get all of that done within this construction season. We still have hopes. Unfortunately, we have not gotten any bidders for that project yet. It's not just here in Los Alamos that you're seeing a lot of economic activity, and so people are not bidding on it, or they're busy. And so we're hoping to be able to get through the ice rink before the next season, but that's going to be tentative based upon the availability of a contractor. We also have the addition here to the aquatic center. Upgrades to the golf course, their irrigation and tees and everything. And then what am I forgetting but the splash pad down in White Rock. We're also going through the process and have had some public meetings about that as well. It's intended to be located in the Rover Park, the Rocket Park down in White Rock. Pinion Park as well as it's known as well. The Rocket's still there. It was relocated, but due to the history, we kept it there. So those are neat additional amenities to the community that we hope to provide for people looking to live here. Also, visitors as well, especially that splash pad right across the street from the visitor center where so many people come to visit Bandelier. We're looking to build a way. One of the big things we started many years ago with the construction of that visitor center was the idea we wanted to retain some of those visitors that come here. They'd come, go to Bandelier, drive back to Santa Fe for dinner and to stay, and instead we've been focusing on amenities, getting restaurants down there, getting other activities for people who come here to actually spend a couple of days here, spend their money here as opposed to taking it elsewhere. An important part of our community was for a while we lost our public health office, and that was largely due to funding at the state level. There was a lot of concern about the ability for younger members of our community and those that may not have the same economic means to obtain services. So we worked with the state public health office to try to reestablish their operations here, which they were willing to do, but only on a limited basis. They've got still budgetary issues. And so we did actually reach out, and we spoke to them, but also reached out to solicit for private interest. And in the end, we now have a shared use of that space, whereas we used to have a public health office for 5 days out of the week. That went away to 1 or 2 days a month. Now we have services there 5 days a week, but it's provided partially by the public health office for 2 days. The remainder of the week is provided by Las Clínicas del Norte, who is a contractor with us, and they provide a wider range of services than the health office would do, primarily looking at some physicals for children, sports physicals and the like, and their proximity both to this facility here as well as the high school is important for those younger members of our community to be able to access it. So it's nice to have that here. We're looking forward to that relationship as we go into the future, and it's great to have the state operating with a private provider in a county facility here in the community. Another neat project, and this may not have come to everyone's attention yet, but it's been in process for a couple of years, is the development of an urban trail. And as many of you know, we've been working on the Canyon Rim Trail, starting down at Entrada. It's now been expanded all the way up to the Smiths location, and we're looking to move it further west. But once we get west, once we get to about 20th Street, our transportation board had determined that it would be very difficult to extend that further west towards a hospital, which had been an interest of many, but due to topography in Los Alamos Canyon, as well as ownership of property, it was going to be a very difficult task. It was an inordinate amount of money per the estimate, and so we started looking at other options. We had a citizen come forward and suggest an urban trail to connect that Canyon Rim Trail to the community more, and it's a little faint, but you see that both the yellow and the red lines. That is the planned expansion of the trail, which once we bring it to 20th Street could then cross Trinity, and ultimately you could make it all the way to the aquatic center on that trail by foot, on a bicycle or the like. Neat thing about this project, once we had the planning in place, our personnel went out and started looking for grants. We've already received $2.5 million to construct this trail from federal transportation grants. So this will be coming, and it'll be a neat way to have people visit the various locations downtown, have a way to actually access some of our business area by foot, by bike, without getting on the main thoroughfares, which was a concern for many with children and otherwise. So last year when I gave this talk, we had just been through a pretty serious winter storm. We got 2 feet in 24 hours on January 2nd of last year, and that wasn't the only storm we got. It was just cumulative. And just wanted to remind everybody, as we look outside, yeah, it's cold out. We got a couple inches 2 days ago, but it was a significantly different year for weather last year. And that caused primarily our street crews to be out quite a bit during the last year. And it's always neat. I was in Santa Fe on Tuesday. Had to be at a meeting in Santa Fe 8:30 in the morning. Okay, myself, 2 members of the county attorney's office are sitting there. And we had a separate meeting at 1 o'clock up here. All 3 of us had to be back for, and we knew that. Then we get a phone call, and the person who we were going to be meeting at 1 o'clock was in Santa Fe and was asking if they could conference call in because they didn't want to drive up here. I was kind of like, well, we just drove down. We made it. It wasn't a problem until you hit, the opera, right, that hill going up to the opera, you know. And I think that's indicative of our expectations. I wake up take the dogs out walking. I'm waiting for the phone call as to whether or not we should delay or close county facilities. And I'm pretty reluctant to do that because we provide the services to the community. But it is typical. You know, I got to think about a lot of the employees that work for us because they come from areas that don't have that level of service. My point being, we try to provide a high level of service, and next time it snows and you can actually get to work or get the kids to school or whatever, just think about our staff that are out there that have been out there all night. You hear them as you're laying in bed and the scraping goes by and it's kind of like, why are you waking me up? But there's a good reason for that. And I really appreciate the high level of service and the dedication our staff have to that cleanup. As an example here, but also, if you recall, we had some resultant damage from that storm, significant. There was a lot of concern. Diamond Drive was falling apart. But over the last year, which I'm referencing in this talk this morning, we did go through the project. We paved the entire Diamond Drive from the roundabout to the bridge. Had a contractor. We had a contract in there. They had to get the part in front of the high school done before the school opened. They accomplished that and shortly thereafter completed the rest of the project. I know that it was a little harder to get to and from areas in town, but I didn't hear a lot of complaints, and so I hope that was indicative of everybody's appreciation. I think the contractor did a good job in keeping everything open and also doing the construction. And then on top of that, we were able to apply for federal funds. This was in all $4.25 million project. And we received that same amount from FEMA to reconstruct and for our cleaning efforts. So ultimately, it didn't cost our taxpayers any more money to rebuild this roadway as well. And so if you look outside, I see it's nice and smooth, and it's nice to see these days now that we've gotten through that project. Another project you're probably familiar with, still going on, has been the Roundabout Construction. And I'll say it, I got a picture here. It's not a county project, it's a state project. I'll give you the phone number if you have some concerns. But it is clearly affecting everybody who comes to work here. It's one of the 2 entrances to town. It's slowing things down. Why don't we have any, they worked all last year. Why is it not done? Well, this is the county's portion of that project, is that corridor has all sorts of infrastructure in it. Has for many years, and we had to take the opportunity when we were going to reconstruct it to upgrade that infrastructure. These are some examples of the things that were done. I've got other pictures, and there are banks of pipes that size, sometimes 4 wide, that went through there. So all the work that doesn't look like a lot happened was all the basis, the underground work that will facilitate them completing that project during this next construction cycle this year. It's planned to be done by the end of this year, and then we've been holding off on some other projects, which I think I have a slide for in a second, so that we don't limit our access to the community. And that would be another project that we're working on, is the intersection here between State Road 4 and the truck route. This is a light day for traffic, this picture, because if you've been through it at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I've been on it one time where the line started up at the Echo station, and then you're following it all the way down, and I know it extends fully back into White Rock at times too. It's a single lane, and that's the problem. We have already designed the intersection to where there would be 2 left turn lanes from this location and 2 through lanes here. so that hopefully for every cycle of the light, we get twice as many cars through that and minimize the backup. That's the best we can do by just addressing the intersection. There is some state plans to come back and upgrade State Road 4 in the next couple of years. They have a 5-year plan, and I think we're still looking at a couple years out before that's implemented. But this was to be funded by the monies through the special environmental projects of the lab. If you recall the issue with the waste and the kitty litter issue, I guess is the best way to say it, resulted in some fines that were actually, rather than fines that went directly to the federal government, they were put towards local projects. And this was one of the projects that was identified in that, that expense for those monies. So we were waiting on this. We've done the design, but didn't want to initiate that until we're complete with the 502 project. Otherwise, there'd be limited access to our only two entrances to town. And then I believe this is my last slide, but I had the opportunity to go out and review a project that we did in Graduation Canyon. And, oh, excuse me. I've had a bit of a cold, and I was worried that it might mess with me today, but if after the Las Conchas fire, there was a lot, and there still is, a lot of degradation, a lot of runoff, and it's taking all the materials down to dirt, down to the rock, the bare rock. After the fire, Graduation Canyon became basically a rock-lined canyon down to the bedrock. All the vegetation got washed away. There was nothing holding back our rainwaters, and it was creating more problems as, you know, by not slowing that down, then you get greater erosion in subsequent storms. So the county did initiate a pilot project to try to revegetate Graduation Canyon and restore it to its original view. Now, here, got to travel with the contractor after it was complete, and they came in and put a variety, I believe it was 45 chalk dams, as they called it, and that's rocks, limbs, debris, to slow the progress of water as it comes down this canyon. In doing so, the silt settles out. You start getting the basis for vegetation to regrow, and you also allow it to have some time to grow and get some purchase before it's washed away. This is a window into that process. You can see the water running, still running underground, but we've got dirt and vegetation on top. And if you ever had the chance to walk Graduation Canyon, maybe 2 years ago, and then today, I think you'd see a stark difference down there. The contractor himself was like, I've never worked with the county on these types of projects. This is typically a Forest Service or a private entity type of thing looking at restoration. But because we are so interested in the environment, the natural environment here, this is part of our trail system that was becoming denuded. We did try this pilot project, and it had great results. We're hoping for some similar types of things in the future. And in fact, we anticipate putting 1 or 2 interpretive signs down there with before and after pictures so that people traveling can understand, you know, both the forces of nature, but also the efforts of the county to restore some of that. So these are all projects we've been working on in the last year. Hopefully it gives you a little window. You're probably familiar with many of them. Maybe some of them were new, I don't know. But with that, I just wanted to say thanks for being here, and I'm here for some questions if we have time, Patrick.
Sure, so let's all give Harry a round of applause. Cognizant of everyone's time, we've got about 10 minutes left we've allocated, and we want to make sure we have time to raffle some baskets. Why don't we take 2 or 3 questions for Harry? I know he's accessible in other methods for follow-up questions. We have county counselors here who I'm sure would be happy to answer any other questions as well. So we'll take 2 or 3
Thank
questions.
you for that.
I was just curious, what's happening with the Mary Mac and the old Smiths? I mean, that's just sitting there, and I mean, it would be nice to see it go to productive use. Do you have any update on that?
I would love to tell you what that's going to be scraped and rebuilt or what the outcome is. The one thing about that, obviously, and I'm sure everyone understands, it's a privately owned parcel. We've been trying to facilitate discussions all along, working with the owners as well as some of the tenants of that facility, and trying to promote redevelopment of that property. Now we have some tools with our community development department in terms of code enforcement types of things that we've implemented over time, but we don't have all the tools we need to really force transition of that property. But my understanding is they're very interested in it. They have a couple of bids that have been submitted, that are being considered, and the word on the little birdie tells me we may hear something in the near future. But that's the best I can do because it's not our project.
Bill?
Yes.
Let's see, on two quick ones. One, what's the status of the old DOE field office site?
Yes, sir.
And on the pond, I know the county's been striving mightily to try to manage the algal bloom and those sorts of things.
Right.
What's that status?
Sure, thanks. The housing projects I showed are not all the ones that are actually in process right now. There's several other. Black Hole is looking at redevelopment. And the Lasso site, as you mentioned, the council has entered into an agreement with a developer out of Santa Fe to put in, I believe it's 160 approximately, market rate condominium product on that site. And they've gone through the site planning process and are right now doing their financial due diligence. I know there was some issue with the type of financing they wanted to do. They did get an extension and are due to close on the property April 23rd. So we're looking towards that potential now. I know, as far as I've heard, everything's in order to complete that process or complete the transaction. Then I believe they have approximately 2 years to construct after that. As far as the algal bloom, yeah, that's something that we've been struggling with. It's hard to have a body of water next to what we hope to have green grass. You feed the grass and it also feeds the algae that it drains into. We did find some non-toxic products to try to address the algae, and we were able to reduce that bloom, but we're going to be looking at means. We put in, when we redid the pond, a lot of things we thought would address that problem, because we'd had a problem in years past, and included things growing, the right type of fish to eat those that like to eat algae and stuff. But in practice, we have to refine those a little bit, and that's what we're doing right now. So thank you for that.
Take one more. Any other questions?
Yes.
George?
George.
I'm wondering about the Motel 6 property. Nobody ever seems to complain about that. They complain about Milcott House and all that.
Right.
So,
Another privately owned property. They, it's been a mixed bag over the years we've had some issues with work being performed without a permit. We've interceded and there's been permits pulled. They have had intentions per those permits to reopen. If you looked, I believe it was 2 years ago, they actually bricked the front of that building. There's been some investment in it, but at the same time, my understanding is that the owner of the property owns multiple properties and is focusing his efforts elsewhere. But that as a privately held property, we have done what we can with code enforcement, and at this time it's to the point where it's not a condemnable type of situation, so we're waiting for them to complete their renovations of it, and that's what we understand without a finite completion date right now. But you're right, it's kind of hidden there.
not hidden at all.
Well,
All my tourists are trying to say, we can't stay there, it's closed.
exactly, and there's a lot of issues with that site because the vacant property to the west of it has a shared parking status with that. As well, it had a physical connection to the LAN, which, if you recall, the county entered through some court action and actually got that part of the building demolished. It's probably been 4 or 5 years ago now. But we've been trying to move that forward. It's just that we're dependent on the owner to do the investment to get it done.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Harry.
Sure, thank
Appreciate
you.
it. And